All right, you guys, welcome to the For the Love podcast. We are clearly in an interesting environment. This is the South by Southwest edition of this week, and you are in for a humongous treat. Okay, let me lead in like this. I don't know if you know this, but I was a teacher. I was a teacher for the first 4 years of my adult life. And so the first 3 years I taught fourth grade. And then the final year, when I was pregnant with my second kid, who's sitting right over here. So I was pregnant with her the whole year. I taught first grade. And I knew the first graders were hilarious and adorable. I still have stories that I tell from the first graders. But you guys, I knew that I was in the wrong age group because on the first day of school, I wrote my name on the board and they were like, "Miss, we can't read." And I was like, you know what? I've started on the wrong foot. I see that we need to roll it back. Let's go to letters. Anyway, I have a huge heart for teachers and for educators. And if you've been around me for 5 seconds, you know this. I am passionate about what teachers do and how they serve and love our kids. I mean, for crying out loud, they are literally helping us to raise the next generation. Every second of it matters, and it's getting harder to be a teacher. It is getting harder to continue to stay a teacher. Education is just complex space. And so I'm always wanting to use my influence in any way that I can to elevate the profession, the teachers, the educators, the teachers of teachers, the leaders of teachers, so that every new generation puts out an incredible crop of teachers that are raising all the rest of our kids. So, you guys, today's guest she is a powerhouse, and that is a fact. Doing incredible work, shaping the next generation, not just of teachers, but of education. We have Dr. Stacey Ludwig Johnson here today. She is at Western Governors University, which is absolutely so near and dear to my heart. And Dr. Johnson is the Senior VP and the Executive Dean at the WGU School of Education. So you're kind of a big deal. You're very fancy. And I am so delighted to meet you. Thank you for taking the time to be with me. I mean, she is zipping around, you guys. She's been at a thing. We're doing this. She's off at a panel. You're really you've sandwiched this in today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for just the privilege to be able to chat with you for a bit. So I'm excited.
Me too. Listen, you've logged what, 25 plus years here?
Yeah.
And really with an eye toward how do we continue to reimagine and reevaluate and rethink even how we train and support educators. This is such an important question. We just cannot ever rest on our laurels and imagine that what worked 30 years ago is going to continue to work. So I lead a large community of women, and you're one of my favorite partners to work with because women in the middle of life are wanting to go back to school. And I was telling you earlier before we started, WGU makes it possible. They could not do it through a traditional model and still keep a full-time job like most of them have.
Right.
And most of them are moms.
Right.
And they're raising kids at the same time. And so can you just parse out a little bit further what the model actually looks like?
Yeah. So what I love about what we do at WGU is the focus on building degree programs, and I'll go a little bit deeper in a second, but building degree programs that lead to a career that is a progressive career. Like, it is not just a job, it's a career that has growth. So it's really that sort of career focused, work-based focused, and skills and competencies. And so we look at, through partnerships and through other resources, like what are the skills and competencies needed for any particular role, and then our degree programs are built specifically to build those skills and competencies. And so as a student is working through a WGU program, everything that they're doing is all focused on gaining the skills and knowledge and abilities needed to be successful in that career or that role.
You don't waste a minute.
You don't waste a minute. It's like the most efficient, effective path. And the thing that's even better is that everything is based on evaluation of those competencies. And so in a competency-based model, there's three really important pillars. There's the skills and the alignment to a career. There's the curriculum, and most importantly, the assessment of that curriculum, because in a competency-based model, that's the end all, right? Do we have valid and reliable assessments of those competencies? And so students can accelerate their progress through our programs if they come with skills, or if they're able to dedicate more time per week, or maybe in some areas they happen to have more skills, so they can accelerate through their program, because as soon as they can take them past the assessments, they continue to progress. And they complete. And then there's a third part of it, which I'm really proud about WGU, which is really sort of the instructional delivery and thinking about the entirety of the student experience. And so we don't believe in courses, like programs that are just like a course and a course and a course. You string all those courses together and you get a degree, because we're focused on completion, which is what makes me really proud to work at WGU, because what matters to us is if students start and they don't complete, we've done nothing to further like their growth and to help them reach their goals. And so when we're developing programs, we're not only thinking about like how do we build the right instructional supports and content and the right assessments so we can validate those competencies, but how are we thinking about how students progress through that entire student journey? How do we layer in the career support and services that are needed? And even our entire model is, we call it sort of a specialized or disaggregated. So when a student starts at WGU, they have what's called a program mentor who, I wish I would have had this, starts with you when you're admitted and stays with you until the very end. And then, so that person is helping you in all those in-between moments, you know. How do I keep you moving? What are the things going on in your life? How do we approach your balance of your, you know, academic related activities with the one or two jobs that you have, the kids or the parents that you're supporting, all of those other things. Like that program mentor is helping you like mind your way through all of those like little mazes, right? And then we have course instructors who are content experts in each of the courses. And then because again of the competency-based model, we also have a faculty that are evaluators. And so in our model, the instruction that you're receiving from those content experts is separate from the individuals who evaluate you, which I love, because from sort of an equitable standpoint, that's really important, because you can't influence somebody to give you a grade, right? It's really about, at the end of the day, here's the skills that you're going to need to demonstrate. Here's the way in which you can gain those skills, and there's multiple ways to do that. But at the end of the day, then you've got evaluators whose core and only responsibility is to come in, review and evaluate your work, provide substantive or like really great deep feedback to help you further on your next iteration. And that means that regardless of who you are, where you are in your program, when you're being evaluated, it's against a rubric, and they have inter-rater reliability and all those kinds of things. But regardless, at the end of the day, especially from a leader standpoint, if you accelerate and move quickly, or you need to go slow because you have competencies you need to gain, I go to sleep every night being very comfortable, because even if I have an accelerator, which can scare people when people move through programs quickly, I know that they've had to demonstrate those competencies on those assessments. It's measured. And I love that too, because we know what we're measuring and that it matters, and it also helps us constantly refine our programs and ensure that, you know, these are the things we're measuring. Now let's speak to our employers. You're gaining these new graduates every day into your jobs or whatever it happens to be. Are they successful? Like, are we equipping them with the competencies and skills that they need to be successful? And getting that feedback from employers just constantly helps us sort of reinvent, reimagine, disrupt ourselves to ensure that we're always developing the very best sort of workforce-aligned programs.
It's a phenomenal model. I've seen it work for so many women in my community, and at whatever age. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about educator care right now, because teaching's always been demanding. It's a demanding profession. But the past handful of years, there has been a new level of pressure. Some of that, of course, we've just recently seen with the pandemic and what educators were expected to innovate overnight, on the spot, without the technology, without the training. Everybody's hair was on fire. Boy, what heroic work educators managed in that time. But even increasing expectations, I mean, let's just be honest, a decrease in support at the state level, and sometimes at the federal level, just even in language. And what people are willing to expect out of teachers but not invest into teachers. It's a soup pot of stressors. And so I'd like to just hear from your perspective, what are you seeing when it comes to the well-being of teachers right now?
So you mentioned the pandemic, and it's so funny. It's been 5 or 6 years now, and it feels like it's been a long time ago. But I'll tell you, from an educator preparation standpoint, which is sort of my lens, we've been essentially training teachers the same way for decades. And I think in many ways, school districts are ahead of educator preparation programs in some ways, because we get pretty comfortable with the way that we've developed programs, et cetera. So I think when the pandemic came, it forced a reset and rethinking, because out of the pandemic, what classrooms looked like, so significantly changed, to your point. All of a sudden, hybrid learning, completely online learning, and those sort of methods of teaching are still there. We haven't completely gone away from them. And so I think that sort of requirement to rethink how we were going to future-proof education, what would education look like 5 to 10 years from now, forced, at WGU in particular, we completely reimagined our entire ed prep curriculum. And part of that is to your sort of second point, which is how do we care for educators and equip them with the resiliency and the supports they need to last in the classroom, for the long run, right? So when you think about it, we used to always hear about teacher shortages, and now if you listen, during the summertime as we're starting to go back to school, you'll hear teacher shortages, but you also hear educator well-being. That didn't used to be part of...
That was not the lexicon,
that
really.
was not the lexicon, and coming out of the pandemic, we hear more about it. But that is still an ongoing concern as we progress. And the reason why people should pay attention to that is because when you think about the teacher shortage, and just real quick data so people have a context, and there's in the 24-25 school year, so that's the school year we're in now, but in those first sort of quarter of the school year, there was nearly 49,000 vacant positions. That means classrooms that didn't have a teacher, at the front of the classroom. There was another 350,000 teachers that were in the front of the classroom, but they were underqualified, or they were teaching content that they weren't licensed to teach. Okay, so together, that's 400,000 positions that are either vacant or underqualified. So that's
a crisis.
That's a crisis.
Yeah.
And when many people think about teacher shortages, what they're thinking about is what's that front end, that revolving door of the first year teachers. We just got to get people in front of the classroom. But what people aren't recognizing is that to really have an impact on shortages, it's about retaining teachers longer term. And that's so important, because teacher retention, teaching's a skill. You improve the skill with lots of practice and years of experience, right? And so really, when you think about, and the data is crazy, depending on what you look at, anywhere from 30 to 40% of teachers that are first year will no longer be teaching by year 5. So it's just an enormous. So for those of us that have been trying to solve it through the revolving front door, if we don't change our mindset to retain teachers in the classroom longer term, we'll never solve the teacher crisis, right? And so that's where not only like school districts, educator preparation providers like WGU, like all of us are starting to really focus on, okay, what is that long-term strategy for retention? And it's really ensuring the well-being of teachers. And I think there's so many strategies around really thinking about well-being and how do you help teachers prioritize their well-being, sort of see them as a whole person, just like we would hope we'd see kids, right?
Sure.
Like they're more than just a professional that's doing a job. Like how do we look at them as a whole? And so many sort of school leaders and administrators, and again, like we are in our programs, are looking at how do we equip them with the skills to sort of prioritize their own well-being? How do we support the way in which they create greater connections within the school as a community with other teachers? How do we prioritize it ways in which they have their own sort of continued professional growth and development, easy for me to say, because those are all things that just lead to greater sort of long-term satisfaction and retention. And that's even without getting into all the politics and all the other pieces, right, that are just bombarding teachers every day. So I think those are some important things that we oftentimes, like, we don't take a moment to care for teachers that are caring for our kids. And if we don't, like, the long-term impact of teachers leaving the classroom, when you think about the critical nature of not only the academic support, but the social emotional support that they provide, they're the trusted adult, sometimes a key trusted adult in a kid's, like, kids network and everything else. Like, if we don't sort of pour in the care there, the long-term impacts, student long-term retention goes down, their achievement goes down, their ability to build sort of stable and trusting relationships decreases. So teacher sort of well-being and caring for teachers it's more than just care, that it's like a community sort of need that we need to pay attention to.
So obviously, from your standpoint, as you're preparing teachers, you're educating the teachers, you can do as much as you can to build in resiliency, to build in some of the best practices that they can use as adults to just prioritize self-care. And but at some point, you pass them off to their school district where they're going to work, to the town that they're going to work in, the community that they are going to serve in as well. And so from your standpoint, how would you suggest that schools, administrators, really even the families that make up the student body population, how can they begin to create more supportive ecosystems for teachers? Let's say you've given them everything they can. You're like, here's how to be resilient, here's how to care for yourself, here's how to use boundaries. But then, once they get dropped into their environment, they need to have care there too, because that's then where they're going to practice their profession. So what do you think on that side of the equation are some of the solutions?
So I think one thing that we often don't talk about a lot is the school culture, right? Like teaching in and of itself can be a pretty isolating experience. You're sort of like in the classroom, you are pouring out your heart and all of your energy onto 25 kids, and you're held to high standards. And so that's sort of like, if you allow that to exist sort of in isolation, can be a tremendous load on any individual, right? So the very best leaders that school principals and others are taking moments where they're creating connection and filling the cup of the teacher so they can fill their students' cups. But that sort of, and this gets back to like why teacher retention is so important. Those first couple of years as you're a brand new teacher in a school building, like having those more experienced teachers who can mentor you and support you and create that sense of community and belonging as teachers that then model that for their kids. But if if we start to see more and more, and we are seeing more and more teachers that are leaving earlier, like that ability to have that ongoing mentorship and coaching within the school building and even district-wide through induction programs is something that's really crucial to supporting, new teachers
Certainly.
and helping them walk that pathway. So that's one important thing, is sort of creating those very intentional opportunities for connection and community building within the school. And that can be also just creating, like, one of the principals we'll be talking to this afternoon, like on Wednesdays, half of their day is spent on professional development and really well-being support for teachers. Because if they're not whole, if they're not showing up in a healthy state, and prioritizing their own sort of well-being and self-care, like they're not fully available to the kids. So I think those sort of ongoing coaching, ongoing professional development that's personalized and meaningful, ongoing coaching, ongoing sort of intentional community building within the school is really important. And I think that building that triangle of the students, the parents, and bringing the parents and getting parents invested in creating that school community, because the most successful teachers, when you think about that triangle, have parents who are also recognizing them. And I think that's the other piece to all of it, is we forget just those moments of recognition and praise. It's like, every day, just those little small moments to support the teachers and let them know that they're doing a fantastic job. And even if those are thank you notes coming from parents, like all of those add up over time to just build a more resilient sort of school culture and well-being for teachers.
Great
So
point.
it's
Those
just like,
matter.
you got
Those
to pour it
little
in,
notes,
right? I know.
Those are low-brow, low-touch ways that accrue.
They do.
To help a teacher feel loved and seen and supported and encouraged. As we sort of get close to the end here, obviously teaching isn't what it was 10 years ago, and it'll be different 10 years from now. So I'm curious what you see right now as some of the primary shifts in education, and then also in the way that we're needing to train educators. And that's your side of the street.
That's a great question. And so you and I were talking earlier about we literally took this opportunity and time to sort of reimagine our entire curriculum, which, that's no small task.
Oh, my gosh.
We didn't reuse any courses
just,
or anything.
went scorched earth,
scorched the earth and start over.
It's huge.
But when we were thinking about what it takes to future-proof our content, future-proof our experience for future teachers, we were looking at certainly a personalized experience. So understanding and sort of that looking at each student as an individual and how they're progressing and being able to personalize instruction is so key. And whether that's adult learners, whether that's K-12 learners, so I think that personalization is key to the future of education. A second is folding in that well-being or that social emotional support along with academics. And that's for teachers and the students they support. Those two things go hand in hand. A third is a focus on that competency-based education, because when you think about it, that K-12 sort of support needs to lead to the skills and the knowledge and abilities that's going to create a nice, successful transition, whether it's to college or onto a job and a career. So competency-based, where you're focusing on mastery of content versus just seat time in the classroom.
Certainly.
And that couples so nicely with personalization. I think the other one is really a focus on, and we can't ignore it, which is sort of technology embedded, AI embedded supports, and an optimistic perspective on that, because it's not going away.
Right.
And actually integrating AI into educator preparation. I'm going to kind of go from that lens for a moment. I said this a little bit earlier. When you think about the fact that teaching is really about developing skills, creating educator prep programs that allow for intentional, deliberate sort of practice and early clinical experiences so that you're constantly practicing. And we use, for example, AI to create safe environments for our future teachers to practice
Great.
a lot, right? Without
amazing.
being in with a vulnerable population. Like
Yeah.
practice, and then early clinical experiences so that they're in a classroom, they're watching the instructional sort of approaches being modeled by a more expert teacher. So through AI, those early clinical experiences, that really sort of intentional, hands-on, work-based, apprenticeship-type models are really key. And I think long-term, like, this is always going to be a challenge, but this, when I think about educator preparation in particular, if you couple all those things, as well as sort of the evidence-based practice, like real research-based methods and teaching approaches are critical. But one of the wicked problems for and barriers to entry from teachers has been the need to sort of stop out of their jobs. So they're cruising along in their initial licensure program to be a teacher. They get to student teaching. They have to be full-time in a classroom. And traditionally, that has meant you had to quit your job.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
you had to lose your insurance, right? And so if you're working one or two jobs already, and you're a parent, and now you're at this most critical aspect of your program, and you have to quit your job, like that has been such a barrier to entry
is so
for
true.
like the very best teachers, right? And so with teacher apprenticeships, which there's been more local funding, state funding, and even federal funding for apprenticeships, creates the opportunity where they can, like for an entire year, they're actually engaged in the classroom and they're being paid. And so
Wow.
that removes that ultimate barrier. And
Huh.
in the very best apprenticeship type models, it's essentially gaining your initial licensure program with little to no expense for teachers, which is what they
amazing.
need. Because they oftentimes, if they spend a
course.
great deal of money on their program,
Oh, I
mean,
remember my
it's
first
just
year of
terrible.
teaching, I got a check from the district for the whole year for all my supplies, and it was $75
yeah, it's not that much.
for the whole year. I just couldn't believe it. You are so right. These are the new ways to
These are-
support teachers in a way that they can come in the first place and then stay. Let me just ask you one question as we land the plane here. I have a lot of teachers in my community and administrators. I just have educators in general. That's a huge chunk of our crew. So for any of them, so at whatever level they're at, listening, and they feel stretched so thin and underappreciated, of course, discouraged, even if they're all the way to the threshold of questioning if I should stay or can stay or want to stay, what would you say to them?
We need you. I mean, the teaching is, like I call it, the mother of all professions, right? The future doctors, the future lawyers, the future presidents, the future teachers, the future business administrators. It all begins with teachers who are committed to pouring out their heart and their energy into our kids. Like, it is the most important job. And when you think about the kids that are under your care, and your ability to inspire them to take great paths, to dream big, to strive, to set their goals greater than anything they can possibly imagine, we need people who can do that and do that really well, because our future depends on it. So for anybody that's considering leaving because you think you've maxed out, if we could just take a moment, prioritize care, your own self-care, your own well-being, do that why. Like, why did I start? Why did I start teaching to begin with? And like, if you can recenter yourself in a very intentional way, like, we will surround you. And if you don't feel surrounded, raise your voice, because advocate for yourself, or find others in your building or in your community that will advocate with you, because people will listen. And it's the voice of the educators that is the voice that needs to be heard. It's not the policymakers. It's the people that are in doing this work every day. So I would just say, please don't give up. We need you. We're working very hard to try to make the work that you do work that like fills you up. And if you're in a place where you're not getting that, like open up, find a community that you connect with peers that you can connect with, and then support each other, because, oh my goodness, our kids deserve you. So that's what I would say is.
Our kids deserve you. So for the folks listening, tell them where to find out more about WGU. And what your programs look like, and all the work that you are doing to support educators. And I've got plenty of people also in the community going, I've always wanted to be a teacher. Or I started this career, but that's the one that I want. So where can they find you and find out all the good stuff?
Sure. So you can find us at wgu.edu. And once you're there, there's great information about every program that's available. We cater to people that are like you.
Yeah.
Like they're working multiple jobs. Most of our students are mid to late 30s. And so they know what they want to do.
Yeah.
And that's what we're here for. We're here to put people on that path. And our programs cater to individuals that work full-time. Most of our students work full-time. Most are supporting, whether it's kids or parents or others in their community. And our programs are very flexible and very personalized. And so you can move as fast as you can or as slow as you need to. And we really believe on student-centered supports and just investing all that we have in ensuring that you pass the finish line, because that is what we measure our success on, is the number of individuals who can complete and graduate and then transition into that career of choice.
Amazing. You know, I'm a big fan. I was so honored to give the commencement address at WGU graduation. I guess it was 3 years ago, and I got so tickled. It was right after the pandemic, so I flew to Utah, but it was all virtual. And when I was with the staff and the faculty beforehand, they said, "Now, Jen, this is completely up to you. You could," because I, of course, came in my dress, whatever I was wearing. "You can just wear, this, or if you'd like, we've got all the robes or whatever." Well, what they did not know about me is my fascination, obsession even, with like pomp and circumstance. Give me pageantry.
Yeah.
Give me regalia. Like when they were like, "We've got these robes," I was like, "What else do you have? Do you have tassels? Might I have a hat?" I wore everything they would give me. I had the hat, the things, the stole, whatever they would give me, I put on.
Yeah.
And so it weighed like 50 pounds. And so I got to deliver the commencement address truly like fancy.
Yeah.
Even though, it really wasn't. It was just somebody else's robe. But I've been a longtime believer in WGU, and you have supported my community too. You've given so many scholarships to women in my community to start a degree, to finish a degree, to get a master's. There's so many ways that WGU serves students. And so anyway, I am proud of you. I love the way that you are training this next generation of educators. That's good for everyone. That's good for all of our towns and all of our schools and all of our kids. And teachers who love their work, are good at it, and want to stay at it is what we all need.
That's what we need.
So you're doing your part. You are doing your part. And so for everybody listening, I will put up all the links for all this. If you're like, I didn't get it all, I got you. We will make sure you have links to WGU and everything that you need to put in your toolkit if you're interested. And thank you. Thanks for making time for me today. I'm so delighted to have met you. And I'm just a big fan over here in the wings, cheering on your work, and so delighted to support it any which way I can with my little corner of the world. So
Thank you.
Great to meet you, Dr. Johnson. Now, I told you earlier, because we're at South by, as I told you, and I'm like, nobody goes harder than teachers. So you might need to protect your peace. They threw a party last night, the welcome party, and you know what? Some things just need to stay off the internet, probably, is my guess.
Was great.
Thanks for being here, and thanks for listening, you guys. Thanks for subscribing and being a part of the show, and we'll see you next week.